What do you think the average person? I mean, you've been hanging around grants. We talked before, for an hour or so, and from your background, you've been in the business a long time of federal grants and stuff. What do you think the biggest misconceptions are out there for people? The average person thinking about a government grant. I mean, that's what I get. People. Oh, I want a government grant. And you're a person professional in government grants and helping people, nonprofits, and so. What do you think people's biggest misconception you run into?
I think the biggest misconception is people say, I know there's money out there for what I want to do, or I know that people with friends are getting money, and I think people would be probably pleasantly surprised that it's a pretty clean system here, and that the most grants that are out there, the reason these applications are complicated is they're really trying to be fair and make sure things are awarded appropriately. And even with the discussion of earmarks, which is another, I'm not sure how much we want to talk about that, but the earmark process is still one voted on by Congress. There's some public scrutiny of what goes on. So the feeling is, I know there's money out there, I just don't know where to look. A lot of times that's not necessarily right, but just the feeling that somehow the system isn't working as well as it should be. The answer is it takes work, though. Right. It's not easy for anybody to do this, and yet the information's always been there. It's a matter of piecing it together, and that's a big part of my job.
So, I mean, you're feeling that people say that the system is rigged, other people are getting it because whatever, like the bad term, the earmarks, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad either. They're there for a purpose. I mean, you have problems to solve, and why get 500 people involved in it? So you're saying that it's the skepticism people have?
I think so. I think people are surprised. Sometimes with a couple of grants, we've somebody mentioned the fire department, some of the Fire Act grants. There's a woman in my office who's very good, tries to help our fire departments polish up their grant applications before they go out the door. And she has a pretty good idea if they are of a certain quality that's going to make it through or not, knowing that these are independently reviewed. It's not a matter of somebody from a particular congressional district getting these. So at some level, I think people would be impressed that there's some fairness built into the system.
It's fairness,
So our work is to increase the quality. It's not to somehow rig the system, because that's not the way it works.
I mean, you always see the anomalies. If you have millions of grants going out every year, you always find an Abramoff or whatever. Stuff going on. But that's what I believe. I've been studying this 30 years, and I think 90% of it is fair,
a lot of it's income-based. I mean, the state of Maryland, we're a fairly high average income state, which hurts us on a lot of the federal formulas.
I see.
But that's, again, it's public policy driven.
Right.
So if the policy is...
And if you want to change that, don't yell at the grant guy.
That's right. And
you go to your elected official.
Right. And I don't want to make my numbers go up so badly that I want the average income of Maryland to go down. And
so we get more money if we just quit working.
Which is true. So the states that tend to do well on the federal grants and federal dollars coming will be the average low-income states. But
now, as a small nonprofit, let's say, going after some money to help or working with somebody else, and they find you or whatever to help. Now, the big thing, I think grants are very complicated to fill out. And they are. And by the way, people realize we're talking about real grants. Most of the money that I talk about are probably not even grants, the free money. Like if you go to OMB, only like 20% of the free money that the government gives out is in the form of grants. And the rest is called, with the direct payments and things like that. So that's why, to me, your office is the true grants that's coming out.
Right. I mean, if you take, of all the money that comes into Maryland, 5 pools, the 2 of the biggest are Medicare and Social Security, which are not grants.
Right.
And then
so
you
they're
have
not grants.
Salary and wages, which we do pretty well because we're adjacent to D.C. and have a lot of federal labs, but then grants and procurement. And in fact, grants are the smallest of those 5 chunks of money coming into the state.
So grants are the smallest in the chunks of money that's going back to the people.
Right. I mean, Medicare and Social Security are far and away the 2 biggest ones.
Or if you're a defense contractor.
And that's, again, for the states that do well in federal procurement, defense contracts will be a big chunk of that money. Virginia does exceptionally well on federal procurement for that reason.
Virginia does,
near the Pentagon.
I see, right. They're closer, they're across the river.
No, we do well, too, on that, but we have more of a balance with contracts on the human service, social services
and stuff like that, right. But back, and help with an application, what kind of suggestions would you have? The small nonprofit, what's a good way, from what you know, about getting help with the application itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. I mean, grant writing, we do small sessions on how to write grants, but it's really a couple very common sense things, and you don't need to be the best writer, but you need to follow instructions. And when a grant proposal is put out there, the rules are in there for a reason, and it's to help the reviewers fairly go through the applications that come in. So even if you think something isn't right or should be done differently, your time might come when you're doing the proposal work, but here, follow the instructions. And it's once you actually win, and it's a good practice for if you win grants. The grants management part is pretty tricky too, keeping all the paper and files in order. So the fact that applications are complicated is a reflection of the grants management side as well. So if a group is struggling just to get a good application out the door, it's an indicator that maybe they're not ready to be doing this, and they might want to raise funds through more traditional fundraisers and actual grants activities.
And this is what your office, you hold sessions to help people with these kind of issues. Like the one in September, the grants management issue.
We do, but every state, I'm willing to bet just about every state will have grant writer training available. A lot of the public libraries do this. And there is the Council on Foundations, trying to think, a couple of groups nationally that help do grants training. A lot of it's online, and a lot of it really is fairly basic. People think this is that hard to do.
Just fill in the blanks if you read.
If you read, and you have to keep doing them. The folks that do well are the ones that keep doing grant applications. But our public library in Baltimore, which is also the state library, has a person, and they do grant training work, and we partner with them. And
at your public library in Baltimore, they have someone that does grant writing?
At the Enoch Pratt Library, which is also the state library.
We're
one of the few states where the state library is not in our state capital. And they've got a very effective program with one lady, and she brings in speakers, but it's a place for nonprofits to go. And it's a place people can visit. She subscribes to various services that have data and information, and while some are accessible online, some you actually physically have to come down to look at.
You mean like the Foundation Center directories and stuff like that?
Some of these things that will be fairly expensive for an individual to get, she's able to purchase, and with the people knowing that.
No kidding.
So you'll see everyone from college professors down there who, again, don't have the money to do this, but need an hour or two to look around.
That's terrific to know.
Small nonprofits.
And so your feeling is that everywhere in every state, there's probably somewhere on the public payroll helping somebody write grants.
Right. Or a lot of states have associations of foundations, and in a lot of cases, they'll help with the grant writing activity as well. But the public library system seems to be a cornerstone in a few states I'm familiar with, that they have either librarians trained in this or a grant center, or taking money from the foundation center to have these, they call them collaborating collections, where you can get access to information centrally, but do it at your local library. We have 5 of those in Maryland.
We have 5 of those from the foundation center already?
Yeah, and so Baltimore City was one, but also in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, we have one on the Eastern Shore.
Do you know if they have the database or just the collections? I know they have an online database too. You know what I mean?
And I think it'll vary. I think it'll be the basic amount of information each one has, but I'm not sure.
So that's sort of like, remember what did they call it? The libraries that have all the GPO publications. There were something, I forgot the name of it. There was something like that. Well, gosh. It's. That's what I believe. I didn't know this stuff. I assumed it, and I know little bits and pieces, but until you get really into it. But I keep running to people all over. Oh, I can't do this. I'll never be able. And the help that's out there from the public sector. I guess people don't realize that, if you help somebody, get a grant or figure out the system to solve a problem in the neighborhood, theoretically, your boss has a better chance of getting reelected.
This job, I can, performance is measured in a bunch of ways. I can measure federal dollars coming into state government, which is fairly easy, and that's something that's very important to Governor O'Malley, but we can also measure federal dollars coming into the state, including local governments and nonprofits through census data, and that's important. But a lot of what we do is solving problems. It really isn't just based on the money. While I can measure the money, or I can measure reductions in audit findings, which is important.
I see.
And we've done a good job reducing our audit findings. But the more it's just as important to be helping
Yeah.
somebody get a playground for a
Exactly.
disabled child to use,
Right.
or I spoke while I was waiting for you to set up. Spoke to a lady who's interested in solar panels on an assisted living care nursing home facility. So she just called in. She was referred by the governor's main office to me, and we do have some small grants for solar and energy assistance. So I was simply a conduit, helping her
Yes.
know where to go, show her what the applications look like.
So this is works in an assisted living center, thinking about getting solar energy panels on the assisted living center. She found you, and you're pointing her to a state program that has some
Right.
money for this kind of
in Maryland,
problem.
the Maryland Energy Administration
Yeah.
does a variety of smallish grants, but we had
Right.
a bill passed this spring that increased the amount
Wow.
of money that can be given. And so it took this lady 2 phone calls, but
So
she's
far.
talking, but now she has the name of the person who
Yeah.
runs the program, and she can call and say, I'm looking at the application, I have a question here, when's the next cycle coming up?
Yes.
And it shouldn't take more than, my office, I think, helps reduce the number of calls from
Right.
beginning to end. But even if you're in a state that doesn't have a grants office, every state brings in federal grants. So
Yes.
and every state has very good people who do this work.
do that.
So it's just putting in the legwork.
Well, most people now, what I find, particularly younger people, like our camera guy here, he doesn't even know there's phones unless you're text messaging him, and will do everything online and fine. So they'll put in solar energy online and expect to have everything plop on there.
And if you were to Google solar energy Maryland,
Yeah.
my guess is one of the first things that will come up is the Maryland Energy
Oh, really?
Administration.
Huh.
And we tried, and this is the state has a new IT director. It's just become a cabinet agency, and one of the things the
No
individual
kidding.
agencies work on is to make
Oh.
sure their websites are searchable. So if somebody types in solar
I
energy
see.
Maryland, it should get you hopefully pretty close to the right place,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things they
Wow.
work on. And I don't know much about this either, but
Right.
it's great to see it.
Well,
in practice.
that's remarkable. In 2-3 phone calls, she found the agency that it sounds like the probability is not too bad to
Right.
work at, to try to do that. And so this is, whether it's a nonprofit, you don't even know if there's a nonprofit or for-profit group even.
Nope. And on this
Yeah.
particular grant, I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter if it's for-profit or nonprofit. See, that's
And
how
that's
I
again,
see
and
the
this
world.
is the case.
yeah.
The public policy goal was to increase the use of renewable energy.
Yes.
So in passing the legislation to do that, they thought it was more important just to see who actually, who can do this, because the goal was reducing fossil fuel energy consumption in Maryland. So if the goal was something different, if the goal was we only want low-income people to have solar
Right.
panels, the legislation would look
Well,
different.
same.
The application would
Yeah.
look different.
So what would you say to people who want to get involved in this? We covered all those bases, you think, or there's? How do we get people to really start figuring out the system and using it?
Well, and I would say people are pretty good. And if you're a nonprofit that's actually been in business for a couple of years, you figured this out. You've done something to keep going. A lot of people say, I want to start a nonprofit.
Right.
But if when I get a call from someone who says, I've been in business for 5 years, now I want to do something else, they'll tend to know that. And it's, running a nonprofit isn't that different than a business. You need,
Right.
you need your business plan. That includes the financial part of it.
Right.
And it's, if folks are good, if nonprofits stick around for a while, they will know this part of the system. They may do traditional fundraising, they may do fee-for-service, they may do
Right.
grants work, and that's where, again, I've really been impressed with these nonprofit associations. They can really train people up pretty quickly on things like that. And the one in Maryland is terrific. But it's if you want to do this, you just sort of get started, and you need the other thing I tend to see, you need a passion for your topic.
Yeah.
You don't start with, I'm looking for a nonprofit, any nonprofit. It's usually there's usually an issue that drives the person, and if they're motivated enough to care about children, or cancer, or whatever the issue is, then that drives them to the next couple steps.
No,
or even at a
I
school,
believe
even
that.
a PTA. You'll see a
PTA
PTA president who's
I see.
motivated enough to say, we really could use some money for the kids. And once, if they're passionate about that, there are directions you can go. And if they're just, I'm just in it to fill the chair till the end of the year,
Right.
then the odds are
Wow. Well, that's another group then. Like if you're a PTA president or involved in the community, or you want to get involved in the community, and that's why I feel, God, if people don't like what's going on, you go and change it.
And that's great about a democracy.
And there's people like you
can do that.
helping you to do that. See, that's what I can't get over.
And you don't have to run for office. And a lot of kids,
Right.
a lot of young people these days are coming out of college motivated to make a difference and
Yeah.
help, and doing well in the non. I mean,
I see. Right.
the amount of young people that do well in nonprofits is increasing, and it.
Huh.
I'm not sure I can prove this. In the past, you used to see a lot more young people going into public service and
Yeah.
government right away, and I think you still do see a lot of that. But the nonprofit community, I think it's getting easier to crack for
Yeah.
younger people who have the new skills, the new IT computer skills. But traditionally, I think that's been one where the average age probably been older for people who run
It used
nonprofit
to be.
organizations, and it's changing.
And now it's changing. Yeah, now I think that people really want to do something. Yeah, and
And you can do getting access to information
Yeah.
pretty quickly helps you do things more
Yes.
quickly than 20 years ago.
And it's all free information. Isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And again, and the feds are getting better, and our state, and I think most states are actually getting better at sharing this information. It may not be a one-stop place to go, but if you really are motivated to do something on the topic that you're passionate about, it's
Who do you
easier
think
to
is the
get
best
started.
state that for being IT, getting everything online, that's doing best for getting stuff online and helping people?
Okay, well, since I can't pick Maryland, right? I'll pick
Right.
that's-
Well, I mean, you said we have a new guy here in Maryland that's
No,
very
who's,
good.
who's going to be terrific.
Yeah.
And this is interesting, too, because a lot of, a couple states I work with, Texas, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia, all have grants offices of some type, and all are working on these issues. And Michigan is probably a leader in terms of
Really, huh?
managing data management around grants.
That was
issues.
Texas, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and who else?
And the District of
DC?
Columbia.
Right.
There are other places. Indiana has an office
Right,
in this,
yeah.
and other states have people that do this work, even if they don't actually have a title set up. So when we're fortunate, we do get to talk to a lot of other states who are either setting up
Yeah.
offices or figuring out where you place an office like this to increase the effectiveness.
So it sounds like the best place to start looking at is the governor's office, right?
To call, and
Yeah.
that's, again, most governors, as soon as they come in, they do a good
Uh-huh.
job of,
Right.
the constituents that elected them to be there, you want to serve. So they
And
do
then
pretty
most
good
states
work.
also will have, if not with the state or somehow with the library, is grants training
I think should
services
and going to the
in some way.
going to the public
So
library.
they don't have to look in the yellow pages for some professional accountant or
And-
something, charging
and this-
thousands.
Right, and especially, that's been a niche for us, is by not charging for anything
Yes.
except this annual conference. We're really getting people who either don't have a lot of money or don't want to
Right.
invest money until they really think they need to
Exactly,
do
yeah.
that. But any state nonprofit association or foundations, even calling up the largest foundation or any foundation
I
you've heard
see.
of in your city or
Yeah.
town, call them up and ask not for money, but where can I go to get training on this?
I see.
My guess is they're going to know.
Yeah,
and
that's a good
and-
idea.
And foundations love to be called by people not asking them for money,
For money,
but
just
for
asking
help
for
on
help.
something else.
So then another good source is if you're starting a nonprofit or thinking about it, you find the big foundations, and to find the big foundations, you could do that in your. Big foundations in your state, right? Because they're the people more interested in helping other people who want to help people.
They'll tend
in
to
the
be.
state.
There'll be variations. Some of the biggest foundations in the state might give only to national or international
see,
causes,
right.
not local. But you can access data. GuideStar has a
Right,
website where
that's
there is
true,
free
yeah. And that's
information
true.
up to a certain point, but you can track through GuideStar
Uh-huh.
some of the basic grant
So
information.
through GuideStar, you could find the bigger foundations in your state.
You can. I mean, in
Yeah.
Maryland, we've been fortunate that the Urban Institute has been very generous in generous to us and giving us access to a data system
I see.
where they've put a lot of the 990 tax files,
that's
so
right,
I can
you
track
mentioned it, yeah.
foundations and
Yeah.
nonprofits and even churches by county.
Uh-huh.
And yet you can get this through GuideStar, and then as soon as a 990 tax filing is filed, it becomes public information. It's just a matter of how you collect it and how
Getting
you
into it,
find
yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's what's nice about technology. It all gets there, and that's why I'm not publishing books anymore either. I think that's the way to go. Well, is there anything else? I know the seminar that sounds wonderful. I think I'm going to get there. I think my wife, who runs a nonprofit, I'm going to get her butt there, too.
Yeah,
She should know about that. And I'm particularly all these forms. I mean, if people ask me those kinds of questions, even though I'm not a nonprofit, it's good to keep up on that kind
And
of
it's there.
stuff.
If you go to grants.gov, you can see everything you have to do to become
Yeah.
eligible. But it still can be daunting for
Right.
the first time
Absolutely,
to do it.
yeah. And that's what my big fear is, that people don't know their options. Someone like you and people be out there advertising and charging people thousands and thousands of dollars for things they could get for free or next to nothing.
Yeah, and there was a time that maybe there was more of a need for that, but as the
Yeah.
information is easier to get,
Yeah.
when folks come saying, somebody's trying to sell me something for a lot of money here.
Yeah, so knowing your options, that's what I think about it. Well, I'm glad you're in business.
Okay, well,
Thanks for helping us.
Okay, thanks for inviting me to talk.